Come on aboard, guys.
Morning, Charlie.
Morning. Take a seat. Welcome to another edition of Travels with Charlie. My guests in this episode are Senator Corey Parent from Franklin County and Attorney Dave Kelley. Today we're going to be talking about Act 46. I'm not able to drive the bus, so we're going to have to get somebody else in the seat here. I'm going to come back and have a conversation with you guys. Corey Parent, who is on the Education Committee, you got a pretty good idea about what's going on, and Dave Kelley, who is an attorney. When I say you're suing the state, you say, wait, hold it. I'm not suing the state. What are you doing?
We're appealing the State Board of Education's order of November 28th, merging several dozen school districts against their will. I would say there's a big difference between an appeal and a lawsuit.
What's really at issue? I mean, Act 46 came about hopefully to decline cost as student populations decline. There's no argument there, right? Or is there? Jump in, Dave. Go ahead.
You know, we spent $31 million so far saving money. I don't know how you call that savings, but all we had to do was look at the state of Maine to see what the fiscal consequences of these consolidations are.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but Corey, some of the towns that have already merged, they're not seeing any benefit, are they?
Well, it depends on how the mergers worked out. We've seen a lot across the state, but we saw those early tax incentives early on, which was the difference between what Maine did and what Vermont tried to do. One of the failures the lawmakers who wrote Act 46 felt was that there was no incentives in Maine. They just tried to shove everyone together too quickly and didn't relieve pressure. We provided incentives for school districts to merge early. We then passed Act 49, that when things got a little tight and pressure, kind of a relief valve, and to give some more time. And it depends who you talk to. Superintendents will tell you that it's the best thing that they've seen in a while, and then they're very supportive of Act 46. But sometimes we hear a different story on the streets and towns.
Well, we used to call it the Superintendent's Relief Act because essentially what it did was it said, you don't have to deal with school boards anymore. We're going to get rid of 3/4 of your school boards, and they're such a pain in the neck, all that oversight. And instead of doing 6 budgets, you're only going to have to do 1 budget. So we're going to make your life a lot easier. And I think with the superintendents' lives being made so much easier, maybe we don't need so many superintendents.
Dave, it's not just about the length of time that kids are going to be on this bus going from one town to another town. They're going to be further if they merge and their schools close. It's more than that. I get it.
There are a lot of issues that remain unresolved, and some are political, some are legal. One of the most important political issues is the consequences that are going to be felt by small towns in rural Vermont, like Orleans County, where I live. What eventually will happen is that the larger communities that need to fill seats to build more revenues for their schools will first begin shifting 5th and 6th grades from the smaller elementary schools because they'll have the votes to do it. And when you take 5th and 6th grade out, you begin to do away with the critical mass to make a school sustainable. So smaller communities will begin to lose their elementary schools. What happens then is younger couples with children aren't going to move to a community where they have to put their children on a 2-hour bus ride all day long. They're going to want to live in a community closer to schools. So the lifeblood of small rural communities begins to become more anemic.
These towns haven't consented to merge, and yet they might be asked to take on debt.
No, they are. It's a no-brainer. It's a done deal.
You can't say no.
Greensboro's going to pick up $500,000 from Hardwick. Greensboro can't outvote Hardwick.
Corey, if I could ask you to speak for members of the Education Committee that you sit on, sort of tell me what's on the minds on the way that they would like to see this resolved.
The majority of the legislators still support the goals of Act 46. Act 46 is a bill they believe that will increase equity across the state of Vermont, will give students in every community the same access to the same high quality education no matter where they live. They also believe that as more and more districts come on board and and embrace the concept of working together, more savings will materialize. And examples up here in Franklin County would be the Maple Run School District in St. Albans, where instead of hiring one teacher for the high school, they've transitioned so the teacher spends part of the week in Fairfield. And for the first time ever, Fairfield has a language teacher. So those are the examples that legislators point to that where Act 46 is successful and the goals are being met.
Everything Corey's talked about, sharing teachers between districts, you can do that today. Yeah. There's no reason why you can't. You can set up cooperative agreements. You can set up cooperative relationships. All of that's possible. The real problem is not the voluntary mergers. It's the forced mergers, because those mergers are all small, rural elementary schools. And in those schools, you need to learn how to read and write. You don't need advanced placement calculus. You need teachers who know their students. Small schools do a better job for those students than the bigger schools that are far away from home. When they're far away from home, especially for the economically disadvantaged, the parents are less engaged and their children are less likely to be able to engage in extracurricular activities. Sure. So ultimately, in terms of equity, what Act 46 is going to be doing is harmful.
So Corey, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, you must hear this in the legislature all the time. Why aren't they listening?
You know, the power of the legislature derives in Chittenden County, and Chittenden County they don't have a rural population the way we do here in Franklin County. But, you know, again, addressing the issues, one of the hardest things to grapple with is the shrinking enrollment in our pre-K-12 education system. We're losing, I think the number the governor uses, 3 kids a day on average. And what do we do when we have a system built for 120,000 kids and it's only 60,000 kids? A building meant for 200 students now has 40 students in it. Do you keep that building heated through the winter? Do you still have the teachers, the administrative, you still have the bus routes? Act 46 is part of a longer conversation Vermont's been having since the Brigham decision, the Supreme Court in the 1990s, and that's where we've spent at a local level but taxed at a statewide level, and part of that is you know, a community that we're riding through today, Franklin's done a good job of keeping their tax rate low through all this, but we have other communities that, you know, have passed budgets and passed them along, and we get the cry from Vermonters that tax rates are high. So there's this constant feeling, you know, we have in the legislature is how do we provide what voters ask for in their budgets, but at a tax rate that's reasonable. And we've really disconnected Vermonters 20 years ago from some of this local decision-making process when, yeah, they're going to vote on their budget, but they don't know what it means to their pocketbook when, you know, later in the year for their tax rate.
Well, you know, and if you look at the way we run the education funding formula, only Albert Einstein and Brad James can really understand it. You know, it's
Corey has a great understanding of it. Just ask him.
Well,
Right?
maybe Corey, Brad James, and Albert Einstein.
They say 3 people know actually how to figure it out.
I agree with what Corey had to say about how this is part of a conversation that started in 1997 with the Brigham decision, and we have done some good things. I think Act 77 was a big step forward. We did some good stuff. And we make some mistakes, and hopefully we can fix them.
You're very passionate about this. Why?
What's more important than our students than our schools? I mean, it's the most important thing we have. It's our future.
Where the heck are we? I think we're heading to the Canadian border. So we're still having lots of fun out here today, but it's time to wrap it up, guys. But I got time for one more question. So if you had a magic wand and you could just kind of wave it, Act 46, you'd do anything you want to do to it, what would you do? Corey, what would you do?
Well, you know, again, I've spent the day talking about from the committee and the legislative's perspective, and you know, I think from the legislative perspective, they'd like to see it come to an end in the next year, and you know, all the schools merge. That you know, from the onset of the legislation to get them all merged together and to move forward. And I think, you know, the long-term steps are future consolidations from a legislative perspective at the supervisory union. But, you know, from a personal perspective, I think, you know, we've got to have a discussion about right-sizing our education system here in Vermont. It's a system that when I was in middle school had 100,000 students, that now has 80,000 students, that when my son, born last June, graduates from high school in St. Albans, we'll have 60,000 students, and we can't continue to go the status quo and think we're going to get anything different than what we've got, and that's higher property taxes and a system we can't really afford.
Dave, wave your wand. Anything.
Well,
Anything you want.
I guess the first thing I would do is throw Act 46 right out the window, because the only thing it's going to result in, by getting rid of our local school boards and creating greater power for superintendent's offices, is to spend more money on a bureaucracy. And the $31 million that we've already spent on Act 46, I would have liked to have seen that go into a trust fund, and I would like to have seen that kind of money support the dreams and the needs of students. If we're serious about improving our schools, the place to start is in the classroom, not by creating bigger bureaucracies. I'd like to create a system where every student can have a dream, and we can have the resources to make those dreams come true.
Imagine if you had that wand, you could do that. I want to thank you both for coming here today. Senator
you.
Corey Parent from Franklin County, Attorney Dave Kelley, thank you both for being here today. That's a wrap. Ready to go home. We're ready to go home, guys.
Yeah.
We're ready to go home.
Go.
We're having way too much fun. Come on, let's go.
Okay.
See you in my travel, and I'll be hanging round, covering lots of ground. If you'd be so kind to share what's on your mind, it's time well spent talking president.